Hello friends, in today's video I will be explaining the topic division of labor and first I will discuss about the background of the concept of division of labor, about division of labor itself, about the views of classical economists, etc. And then I will come to the views of Emile Durkheim in next part of this video. So in this video we will discuss what is division of labor, then we will discuss the views of classical economists, and then we will discuss the views of Karl Marx, and then the problem before Emile Durkheim that prompted him to study division of labor, and then the hypothesis of Durkheim regarding division of labor. These things we will discuss in today's video, and I think that once UPSC a question has been asked about the comparison between the views of classical economists and the views of Emile Durkheim on division of labor. So similarly a question can come for the comparison between Karl Marx views and Emile Durkheim views, or simply to understand Emile Durkheim's views on division of labor in a better way, we need this much background knowledge on division of labor. So let's begin the video. So first of all, as you all know that what is division of labor, I expect that you all will be knowing, but let me explain it in a simple way. The simple definition is that division of labor means the breakdown of a complex production process into smaller and specific tasks. Okay, so breakdown of complex production process into smaller and specific tasks, and then assigning these tasks or specific tasks to specialized workers or companies is called division of labor. So this is division of labor. Simply, for example, there is a complex process of making a car. Okay, so this is a car, and making a car is very complex. So earlier suppose one company was making the car. Now after division of labor, the whole process of making a car will be broken down into making of tires, making of steel sheets, making of glass, then other things like leather is used, leather or other cloth etc. used in seats etc. And then other iron or other mineral materials. So production of raw material etc. So these tires can also be broken down into making of rubber etc. So first this process will be broken down into smaller steps, and these talks will be given to those companies or those workers who are specialized in it. Okay, so earlier if a company was making one car, say it took about 3 days in making. There is small scale industry and makes for example we take that it takes 3 days to make a car, then in this way in one day much more cars will be made, okay, by the company, because all the work will be done parallelly. Okay, so this is just an example. So this is what is division of labor. So now we will discuss the important part, that is views of classical economists like Adam Smith etc. So you all know that Adam Smith was a classical economist, okay, who wrote a book. Okay, this is Adam Smith, and he wrote a book, Wealth of Nations. Okay, and in that he discussed about the process of division of labor, and the views of classical economists, or we can say that Adam Smith, were that first of all the division of labor exists only in human societies. Okay, he said that division of labor exists only in human societies and not in animal societies or in other organisms. It does not exist. Why it exists in human societies? He said that because of the nature of human, that is the human. He said that because human beings they take part in exchange, they take part in exchange of things, or in exchange of things or goods, that is the human beings, they do trade, that is they take one thing and they give in return for that they give another thing. So similarly, if one person is making tire, he for a company, and then that company will give him money, and in return for that he will do that work. Okay, so he says that man is very much selfish and rational, so he always works for utility, that is for profit. So he says that due to this nature, human being will always try to fulfill his needs, and he always will always try to increase the productivity. Okay, so reduce inequality, he will always try to increase profit. Okay, so this is what Adam Smith said, that it exists only in human society and not in animal society, because the peculiar nature of making profit, doing trade, or the selfish nature is very much uh, peculiar to human beings. Okay, so that's why it exists only in human society. So human beings are very much rational, they are utilitarian, they work for utility. So this was one of his views. And second, this is first, then second is, he says that division of labor, it helps in growth of civilization. So what does this mean? That growth of civilization? By this he meant to say that division of labor has positive functions for an economy. That it helps in the growth of economy. By civilization, you can take the growth of economy. Okay. So what are these positive functions? Let us discuss on next slide. There are a number of positive functions of division of labor. For example, the first is mass production. Okay, so when there will be division of labor, Adam Smith says that then there will be mass production, that is large scale production, or we can say that the quantity of the goods and services produced will increase due to division of labor, that I already explained in the example that I gave. And the Adam Smith gave an example that, for example, earlier one person used to make 20 pins. He gave the example of pin. Okay, making pins, these steel or silver pins. One person, he used to make 20 pins per day. But when there is division of labor, that is the whole making of a pin is divided into a number of processes, then say the one making of one pin is divided into 18 different tasks, then 18 persons are involved in making pin, and these 18% will work parallelly. Okay, they will work parallelly, and they will produce 20,000 pins per day. So earlier in one day, when there was no division of labor, when all the work was done by one person, one worker only, the quantity was 20 pins per day. 20 pins were produced by that person. But now when all the person they are working together due to division of labor, so this is the scenario of division of labor, then the quantity of the pins has increased by a large percentage. And moreover, if we will check if we will divide what now the pin produced by one person, the one person, okay, what happened, okay, one person, then this will come 20,000 per 18. Okay, so you can calculate that. So the productivity, that is the productivity of one person, will also increase. Okay, this will be more than 20. So in that way, the productivity of the person or the worker, okay, better to write worker, the productivity of the worker has also increased, and the large scale production has also taken place. That is, the quantity of pins has also increased. So second positive function of division of labor is that the productivity, I don't know why this is not working. Productivity, sorry for that, productivity of labor will also increase. Okay, so this is second function. Now the third function, third is that time. Okay, the time taken to produce the quantity of pins, or time taken to produce. So don't take just the example of pin, I am just giving this example, but you can take also other example. So whatever thing you are producing, due to division of labor, time taken will be less. It means that efficiency will increase. Okay, time taken will be less, efficiency will increase. And point number 4 is that when time taken will be less, then it means that cost of production will decrease. Okay, so cost of production will also decrease, and if cost of production will decrease, it means profit will also increase. Okay, so the profit will also increase. And sixth is more machines will be used, because if the process is broken down into simpler tasks, then for each subtask a machine can be made for that, and the use of machines will increase. Okay, and if the use of machine will increase, then the point number 7 will be that quality of the good produced will increase. Okay, so quality will be more. So these are the some of the functions. Apart from that, you can also see that due to division of labor, there will be more opportunities or more job for work. Okay, more opportunities for work, that is, there will be more jobs. Why? Because earlier only one company, there was only one company, say for example for car making, but now there are a number of companies. That task has been broken into a number of steps, a number of subtasks. So more person will be involved in that. Earlier there was one person making a pin, now there are 18 persons are required. So the opportunities for work, or the jobs, will increase. Another function is that the mobility of worker, mobility, that is of worker, will increase. Mobility of worker, what do you mean by mobility? There are two types of mobility in this sense. First is his occupational mobility, that is when the person, one person will be making pins again and again. Not pins, say the task he is doing, he will be specialized in task. His specialization, his skill will increase, his productivity will increase, and due to that he will become a professional in that, and so he can start his own company or something like that, and due to this his occupational mobility, that he will rise in the hierarchy upward. So this is the occupational mobility. And a second is due to this division of labor. It means that division of labor will necessarily will lead to factory system. Okay, so there will be factories for mass production, and due to this there will be geographical mobility also, that people from villages to will move, or workers from villages will move to urban areas. Okay, if another there are a number of positive you can write. For example, when each person will get job according to his taste. Okay, means some person is not willing to work in leather industry, say he is a brahman, he does not work, he does not want to work in leather industry, so he can work in some other job, because the whole process has been broken down, there are more opportunities, he can work in that according to his taste, according to his choice, or according to his specialization. So these were some of the views of classical economists. Okay, so these number one and number two you can write directly under Adam Smith, and I have talked about classical economist. I have written classical economists, so I have clubbed all their views in these points. Okay, so you can just remember these points, or you can just remember few of these points, but these were some of their views. Now next is the view of Karl Marx. Okay, so Marx views on division of labor. So what were the views of Karl Marx on division of labor? So Karl Marx, he, regarding division of labor, he was very much pessimistic. And later on, we will discuss that Durkheim was different from Karl Marx because he was very much optimistic. So Karl Marx was pessimistic, and he talked about the negative dysfunctions, or the negatives of division of labor, or the cons of division of labors. Okay, so he talked more about the negative effects of division of labor. For example, he said that due to division of labor, there will be loss of job. Okay, loss of jobs. Why? Because there will be more use of machines, and if there will be more use of machines, it means automation. And when there is automation, we know that the jobs, men will not be required. Okay, so the jobs of men and women, that is the worker, will, and the jobs will decrease, job opportunities will decrease. Second, he says that he goes against the view of classical economists, because classical economists said that the skill, the productivity of the worker will increase, but he says that the skill of worker will decrease. Why? Because he says that now, earlier a worker was himself involved in the whole process of making one complete good, but now he is involved only in a tiny part, or only in a small task, so that does not require much specialization, much training. Okay, so there will be less training. So when there will be less training, then the skill of the worker will decrease. Okay, overall the skill will decrease. He will get skill in doing a particular task, but overall his skill, his productivity will be decreased, because he will not know the other processes, the other making of other goods apart from that tiny part or the small task. For example, if a person is involved in making rubber, or say or he just makes the laces of the shoes, then just specialized, he just has the skill of making laces, but he does not know how to make a complete shoe. So in that sense, the training will not be there, and he will not, his overall skill will decrease. Okay, so this is what Karl Marx said. Then third is that there will be loss of bargaining power. Okay, bargaining power of worker will decrease. Workers will decrease. Why bargaining power? Because he says that in this capitalism there is a reserved army of laborers. That is, there are a number of laborers who want jobs. Okay, that is the number of workers wanting or looking for jobs are more. Okay, so there are a number of persons who are looking for jobs, and each of these workers, they just don't know how to make a complete complete product, complete good. Just now only to make a small part. Okay, so if they are not getting enough wages, they cannot refuse they cannot refuse the job offer, because they will not get job in somewhere else, in making some else good. Okay, some other good. Because for example, say that a person is involved in just he just you know mm, is involved in leather work, and now due to division of labor he will only be knowing this leather work, or shoe work. He will not be knowing other things. So when there will be when he will refuse the job offer due to low wages, he could not go to some other company. Okay, so now he cannot go to some other company, because he knows only one thing in which he is specialized, and he has no other specialization. So due to this, his bargaining power will decrease. He will be forced to work for that company on lower wages. If he will refuse, there are other workers who they will take the job. There will be no loss for the company, but there will be loss for that person, because he will not get job somewhere else, because he has only one little skill. He does not even know how to make a complete product. So this was the third view. Then Karl Marx, one of the important concept of Karl Marx is alienation, and he says that there will be alienation of worker. This is the most important part. And in Karl Marx chapter, we will study about alienation in detail. Here we will just touch it, okay, just so as to make the views of Karl Marx clear. So Karl Marx says that there will be alienation of the worker. So alienation means that the relation. What is alienation? You can just write that the perverted relationship between a worker or labor and worker and his labor. This is called alienation. This is just definition. I will explain it when I will teach alienation, but here you can just write this, and I will not be explaining this here. I will just be touching. I will be explaining how this alienation how is produced due to division of labor. So for example, Karl Marx says that now what happens in due to division of labor, that there are a number of workers. Okay, there are a number of workers who make together, they cooperate and together make a product. Okay, this make a small part. Number two worker, he makes a small part. Number three, he makes a small part. This worker four makes a small part, and this way. Now the product is made due to the combination of all these workers. So this no one worker has the claim over this product. Who has made this product? The all the workers together has have made this product. Okay, so no individual worker can claim on this product. But this was not happening in when division of labor was simple. Earlier, just one worker was making one product. That is, for example, a shoemaker was making one complete shoe. Okay, but now one shoe or one pin or one car is made by a number of workers. So no worker can claim on this product, so the workers are alienated from their product. So what first type of alienation is alienation from product, that is the worker will not be having any claim on the product. The worker cannot say that he owns this product. He cannot even touch this product. When this product will be in market, he will have to buy it. Okay, so the product that is that involves his labor, he will have to buy it, okay, by giving full price. So this means that from the product the person is alienated, that is he is alienated from his labor, from his work that he has done, because he has no claim on his labor. Okay, labor means his capacity, which he has using which he has made this the product. Okay, so he has no claim over the value of that labor. Second is Karl Marx says that division of labor, it actually leads to division in labor. Okay, division in labor. So division in labor means that the labors are very much divided and there are conflicts among them. Okay, why? For example, in capitalism, some workers they get higher salary, okay, some get lower salary, because those which are doing when the job is broken down into a number of steps, so one job may have higher status, or it may have high cost, and so the wages may be more. Okay, so one job it may have lower status in society, the person doing it may be getting lower status, lower power. Okay, so lower wages. So due to this there will be division among the workers. Moreover, the workers they will have to work with strangers. Okay, so in factory, for example, when there is division of labor, so one person is working with another stranger, so his colleagues are his strangers, they may be from other caste, from other religion. So and the person feel loneliness, suffer from loneliness, depression, etc. So this is another type of alienation, that is alienation from colleagues. Okay, so earlier when there was no capitalism, when there was no division of labor, then one person was doing all this work, and whatever his family was, if his family was also involved, then there was socio-cultural relations with the laborers. But now in factory all the workers, his colleagues are strangers, so he suffer from alienation from colleagues. Okay, he is alienated from his colleagues. Number third is he says that there will be loss of creativity. Okay, due to division of labor there will be loss of creativity. Now when the process has been broken down into small specific tasks, and machines are doing these tasks, and this individual he cannot he cannot decide the design of the final product. This is final product. Okay, so company owner will decide what design of final product, say shoe, we require. Okay, so this person he is just involved in this subtask. Okay, just involved in this subtask, and he does not know the design of the final product, the shape of the final product, because it will be made by clubbing these all smaller parts. Okay, so the person will not be able to use his creativity, will not be able to use his imagination, will not be able to convert his imagination or ideas into a practical product. So this there will be loss of creativity, and when also when there will be lack of skill, Okay, when there will be lack of training time, okay, then there will be loss of creativity of the worker. Okay, so this loss of creativity is is an example of alienation from self, that he is alienated from his self. From his self means that whatever he has in mind, whatever ideas he has in mind, he cannot use those ideas, he cannot use his labor to convert those ideas into practical shape, because he is simply like a machine. Even his even in today's world we can say that even his smile, his gestures, etc., they are being scripted by the company owner. Okay, so how he will react, what job he will do, what tiny job, okay, they are all designed or scripted, or the rules are laid down by the company owner. So the person is alienated from his self. Okay, there is loss of creativity. Then there is no job rotation. There is no job rotation. Karl Marx says that the one person is doing simple task, the smaller task, again and again and again. He is doing the same job, okay, again and again, same job again and again. So there is no rotation of job. Why there is no job rotation? Because he cannot do any other job. He can't do any other job. Okay, so there is no job rotation. He is doing the job in which he is specialized. Okay, he has no other specialization, he does not know making another product. Okay, he's simply involved in a small sub task in which he has gained specialization by doing it again and again. So there is monotony of work. Okay, so again doing same job, no job rotation. This all process is very much, tedious and depressing. Okay, doing again and again job, one person get bored, and so this is also a type of, alienation. So in Karl Marx terms, we can say this is alienation from process of production. Process of production. Okay, so these alienation, I'm just mentioning the this type of alienation. Why I am mentioning? Because when we will study Karl Marx gives these four type of alienation, and I have here in division of labor topic have given you four examples of this division of labor, or this not division of labor, four examples of alienation. Okay, on each type of alienation I have given one example in relation to division of labor. When I will be teaching alienation, I will give more clarity about alienation with more examples on each type. Okay, so for now this much is sufficient. Then number 5 is that is not related to alienation. Number 5 is exploitation. Okay, so Karl Marx says that due to division of labor, he says that due to division of labor, we will have a factory system of production, that we will have capitalism. Factory system. Factory system means that we will have capitalism. Okay, capitalistic system. So in this system, we know that the capitalists, they need profit. Okay, and in factory there are workers, and they all the workers are doing smaller little tasks, and they don't have the bargaining power, because they know only one work, and if they will leave that work, other workers are ready, and they cannot work in some other company, because they don't know making another any other uh, any other product. They are only specialized in doing that half, half work. Okay, so in any other company they cannot work, they cannot make any other product. So these capitalists, for their profit, they will decrease the wages of the worker. So when the wages of the worker will be decreased, then it means the exploitation of workers. When there is exploitation of worker, it means there is a class conflict between capitalists and the workers. So there will be, there are chances of revolution. Okay, So there are chances of trade there are chances of strikes, worker strikes, etc. So all these are the negative effects of division of labor. This was the view of Karl Marx. He was very much pessimistic. I have tried to make it simpler. Okay, so if you have any doubt, you can just tell me in my Telegram group. So next is the views of Emile Durkheim. Okay, so I will just explain a little bit, and then in my next video I will explain this in detail. Okay, so Emile Durkheim's views on division of labor. So in today's video I will just explain the basic, that why he studied division of labor, how he differed from Karl Marx and classical economist, and in next video I will explain in detail. Okay, so first, Emile Durkheim, his time, every theory of every thinker is a product of his time. You can say that every theory, write this in some exam, every theory is a product of its time. Okay, so when we talk about Emile Durkheim's theory, we will talk about Emile Durkheim's time. So Emile Durkheim was living at the time of, when there was crisis due to French Revolution. When French Revolution happened in 18th century. Okay, so this was a period of chaos. Okay, this was the period of rise of democracy, democratic values, rise of liberty, equality, and the rise of capitalism. Due to capitalism, there was a number of problems which we studied in our previous video, that is which led to industrial revolution and all the problems like the wages problem, crime rate, poverty, etc. So there was chaos, there was disorder. Okay, going in this society. So Emile Durkheim, he was interested in studying this solidarity. Okay, so he wanted to study that what are these problems, why are these problems, and in fact, even after so many problems, why no revolutions are occurring, why all the people are not engaged into wars with each other. So what is preventing these wars? Okay, so the problem that I mentioned in the beginning of the video, that the problem in front of Durkheim. Okay, the problem in front of or before Durkheim uh, was that that why despite these uh, chaos and disorder and crises. Okay, so why, despite these, why wars are not happening? Okay, what is preventing these wars? Okay, so why, so there is still an order in this society, so what is preventing this war? So he knew that that this is solidarity, there is some kind of solidarity in the society that is preventing these wars. But what is producing these solidarities? So this solidarity, so the Emile Durkheim gave a hypothesis. Okay, in order to solve this problem, the problem that why wars are not happening, why there is not complete breaking down of the society, why still there is some hope, that I already mentioned that Emile Durkheim was an optimist. He looked for hope. He said that despite all these problems, there is still hope, there is still order in the society, there is still solidarity. And he gave a hypothesis when he did the research. Okay, due to some data, he gave a hypothesis, and the hypothesis was that division of labor, it produces solidarity. Okay, so division of labor produces solidarity. This was his hypothesis. Okay, now we will come back to this later. So first let me explain what he studied in division of labor and how he differed from this classical economist. Okay, so here we can write classical economists say Adam Smith, and here we will write Durkheim. Okay, so this was asked in UPSC once. I will explain it here. In the Karl Marx views, I already explained, and when we will study next part the views of Durkheim, I will compare them there. Okay, so Adam Smith said that division of labor exists only in human society. Okay, but Emile Durkheim, he found that division of labor, it exists, it exists universally. So division of labor is universal. Universally means that it exists in human societies, it exists in animal societies, and it exists in the societies of all organisms. Okay, so this is universal. So if this is universal, it means, Durkheim said that it means it's a natural law. So okay, so it's a natural law, and a natural law, or you can say it's a moral law. So when this is a moral law, then the question arises that should we promote it or should we reject it? Should we promote it or should we reject it? But this is a moral law, this is a natural law, because it exists in the societies of all organisms. So this is first difference between Adam Smith and Emile Durkheim. Second, Adam Smith talked about the positive effects. Okay, he talked about the positive effects of um, division of labor more. He stressed on the positive effects more, but Emile Durkheim also talked about the negative effects also. Okay, negative effects of division of labor also. For example, the negative effects, like he says that there will be mass production, but the negative effect can be, there can be overproduction. When there is overproduction, that is bumper production, then the prices will come down. When the prices will come down, this will impact the manufacturers. Okay, similarly, in division, due to division of labor, there is a lack of responsibility, the concept of responsibility. For example, when earlier one person was making one pin, so if the pin's quality is not good, then the consumer can directly question the person making that pin. But now when 18 persons are together in division of labor, they are making one pin, say the pins, and the pin is of poor quality, then the consumer will not be able to question one person. He will not be able to fix the responsibility. Because he will go to one person, he will say that he is not, he made that part was made by some other person. So because no one has claim over the pin. Okay, because this pin is a product of all the combination of all the workers, so there is a lack of responsibility. Third is there is dependence. Okay, now when the product is made by say more than one person, then all the person are dependent on each other's work. Say for example, one a shirt has to be made, and now the shirt is not made by just one person, but the shirt is made by the combination of 5 to 6 person. Say there is a tailor. Okay, there is one who stitches, there is other who weave the cloth. So if the person who weaves the cloth, the weaver, he has not done his work, he delays, he due to some reason his works get delayed, then the supply will be delayed, and the work of these person, whether they have done it on time, all the process of making the shirt will be delayed due to just delay done by one person. Okay, so due to the a problem faced by one person, the whole process will be delayed. Okay, when one sub task will not be completed, then all the other tasks will also be delayed due to that. So this is also a negative effect. Similarly, there are negative effects for consumer, because in mass production we know that the factory produces the products more or less the same. Okay, for example, all the Nokia phones, say Nokia 1111, okay, they Nokia 11, they all are of same shape, same size, same length, okay, so there is no variety. So the variety in one product is less in in companies, in factories work. But when one person, earlier one person was making say one pin or one mobile say, okay, so mobile, we know that today is made by combination. So let's take the example of pin. So if one person is making a pin or shoe, then every time he makes a pin or shoe, there will be some variety, there will be some difference. But now when the product is made by factory, all the products looks the same, so there is no varieties. These are some of the negative effects, and Durkheim also talked about the negative effects. Now the third one is, he says, the Adam Smith, he says that division of labor, it leads to growth of civilization, okay, so that means it has economics functions, okay, it has positives for positive functions for the economy. But Durkheim says that civilization has no intrinsic value. Okay, this you will not be able to find in most of the books. Okay, so please note down these points. So civilization has no intrinsic value. It means that division of labor. He says that yes, division of labor, it leads to the growth of civilization. But this is not the function of division of labor, because civilization, the growth of civilization, it solves the growth of civilization, it solves those needs of human beings which itself are product of division of labor. For example, we know that due to division of labor there is inequality. Say, let us take the example of Aryans. When they came in India, their society was divided. There was division of labor in that society, and that society there were four castes: one, two, three, four. So all the castes, there was due to this division of labor, there was inequality. Okay. Now when we say that the Adam Smith is talking about the growth of civilization, it means that due to growth of civilization, he will say that there will be less inequality. But Durkheim says that the growth of civilization itself has no intrinsic value. That is, division of labor creates one problem, and then due to division of labor, that problem is solved. So the problem itself is the creation of division of labor. So this is a point from where Durkheim also differs from Emile Durkheim differs from Adam Smith. So the Emile Durkheim wanted to say that, from this point he wanted to say that economic function economic function of division of labor is a trivial function. It's just a trivial, or of lesser value. Okay, this is a trivial function of division of labor. So this is not the main function. Okay, this is not the main function of division of labor. So division of labor has altogether another function which makes it more important, and this is not the economic function. The economic growth is just a trivial function. Okay, due to this point that civilization has no intrinsic value. This was the difference between Emile Durkheim and classical economists. Now, if labor's economic function is a trivial function. Okay, if division of labor's economic function is just a trivial function, then what's the main function of division of labor? What is the main function of division of labor? So that I already discussed here in previous slide, that division of labor's main function, according to Durkheim, according to his hypothesis, is solidarity. So this I am repeating here again in chronology, that the main function of division of labor according to Emile Durkheim is producing solidarity. Okay, so this is his hypothesis. Now how he differs from classical economist I have explained. Now in next video we will study okay, this hypothesis, that how this hypothesis was tested by Emile Durkheim, what he studied. Okay, so first, this is important that up to this point you should understand each and everything. Okay, in next videos we will study that how division of labor leads to solidarity, and the problem also exists that another problem before Durkheim was that if division of labor leads to solidarity, and solidarity is also produced by other things like religion, culture, socialization, social values, ethics, etc. These also produce solidarity. Division of labor also produce solidarity. And he had to prove with the hypothesis that main function of division of labor is solidarity. So division of labor also produce solidarity. Solidarity is also produced by other things. It means he has to study the degree of solidarity produced by division of labor, that what percentage, that how much solidarity division of labor is producing. So moreover, solidarity is produced by many things, so solidarity have to be classified. Okay, that is what what degree of division of labor solidarity is produced by division of labor, and what type of solidarity. Okay, so what type of solidarity is produced by division of labor? So it means Durkheim will study the types of solidarity, and he will study the types of division of labor. He will study the functions of division of labor. Okay, he will study the function of division of labor, and when he will study the degree of solidarity produced by division of labor, or the type of solidarity produced by division of labor, he will have to show that the degree of solidarity produced by division of labor means that the function of division of labor, it is more than the dysfunction. Dysfunction means the negative effects of division of labor. If the functions of division of labor, that is the solidarity produced by division of labor, is more than the negative effects of division of labor, then we will promote this division of labor. Okay, we will promote it. And if the functions of division of labor are less important than the and the negative effects of division of labor are more, then division of labor will not be promoted. We will oppose this division of labor. We will not deliberately promote this division of labor. We will not introduce it into economic system, and this has to be opposed. Okay, so this was all in the mind of Emile Durkheim. That's why he studied division of labor. Okay, this is the process. So I have explained that why Emile Durkheim studies division of labor. So how is it different from a classical economist? And I have explained it in brief. Okay, so you may be having doubts. You can ask in Telegram. Okay, so because each and everything here cannot be discussed in detail. Okay, so this is enough. Thank you very much.